bit.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to work session. I will turn it over to City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. At the February 13th, 2024 City Council work session, let me adjust my microphone here. Council requested a small women-owned and minority-owned business certification program update, otherwise known as SWAM. This afternoon, Susan Goodwin, Director of Finance, will introduce the SWAM presentation and speaker for your work session today. Susan?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. As the manager advised, the purchasing division is a division within the finance department, and so SWAM falls under that division. We're really excited. In fiscal year 2023, we added the SWAM Business Services Coordinator position, and I have the pleasure of introducing Pam Kroom today, who has been in the position for about 16 months. Pam comes to the city with a wealth of municipal experience, including 15 years directly working with small business community. And so with that, I'm going to ask Pam to come on up and give council an update on our program.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I talk loud, so hopefully I don't talk too loud to where it drowns us out. So, as Susan stated, purchasing is responsible for the overall conduct and oversight of all purchases of the city of Newport News. That's our equipment, supplies, and services. We strive to provide all of our vendors an opportunity to work with the city, and we have an aspiration of ensuring that we are utilizing our SWAM firms. So what is SWAM? To become certified, you first must qualify and register with the Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. The program was created to enhance business opportunities for SWAM certified businesses, basically leveling the playing field amongst our business entities. So what are our SWAM designations? As previously provided, is our small, women-owned, and minority-owned businesses. And I'll briefly describe each of the categories so that everyone has an understanding of what the certifications are. So our small, to qualify, you have to have 250 or fewer employees and an average annual gross receipts of $10 million or less, averaged over 3 previous years. For women, you must be owned by 50% of one or more women. For micro, which is a new designation to the state over the last few years, is 25 or fewer employees with an average receipt, gross receipts of $3 million. And then our minority, you must be 51% owned by a minority category. So our SWAM Business Services, once again, the city strives to increase our utilization with our SWAM community, and we do this a number of ways. It's sponsoring events so that we have the opportunity to network and communicate with our small businesses about the opportunities that the city has available. We educate them on the SWAM process. That's whether it is just speaking with them on how to go about the process, providing them tips on how to be successful in applying for SWAM certification, and or bringing in our regional director for SWAM services or business development services, Angela Barber, with the Department of Small Business and Supply Diversity, working with our departments, making sure that they understand and know what businesses are available in our community who are SWAM certified, and collaborating with departments such as development, making sure that we are responsive to the businesses that are down in 2, 5, and J, and also working with our neighboring communities in services or programs that are provided, and making sure that we are knowledgeable of the agencies that are able to support our small business community. So what has happened over the last 15 months? And so this data that is being provided today is a result of that work to date of the presentation being sent in to the city manager. So we've had 18 workshops that I actually have provided to our business community with 248 businesses participating in those workshops. We've had an addition of 931 vendors who are actually registered in our procurement system that want to do business with the city. I've held 170 individual one-on-one consultations with our business community. We've had 3 special events, which means the city actually were the lead organization on those special events where we've invited the business community in. And then I have attended 85 outside agency events across the region to make sure that businesses and the community know that we actually have this focus and that we're working to utilize our SWAM businesses more. I like to highlight CNU, SWAM Fest. One of the main reasons of being there is because a lot of those vendors that participate in that particular event are accustomed to only working with the university or state government. So it's nice for them to be able to see the cities there to be able to talk to them about the opportunities with the city. So what has also been our focus and some recent initiatives that have taken place within the Office of Purchasing in the city as a whole. This didn't start with the hiring of a SWAM Business Services Coordinator. There's actually some work that had been done prior to me being hired. So in 2019, there was an implementation of tracking SWAM vendors. And utilizing the state database in order to do that tracking. In 2021, an electronic procurement system was implemented to make it easier for our businesses to actually do business, meaning respond to solicitations, those opportunities with the city. And it's very transparent. It has a lot of tools that help our businesses understand the procurement process. One of the things that I love about OpenGov, which is the system that was actually implemented, I should say, is the fact that you don't have to, if you're not accustomed to bidding, you don't have to bid on a project. You can actually follow a project so that you can learn the process and understand how it works versus someone just telling you, you can actually watch a process. In 2022, the approval, thank you very much, Council, for hiring a SWAM Business Services Coordinator. In 2023, this last fiscal year, implementation of tracking actually subcontracting work, because when we pay primes, they're paying subcontractors, and we know that there's some utilization there. So that has been implemented so that we can track all of our dollars that are being spent. And in this current fiscal year, we're looking at updating our SWAM Business Services Plan. So what do the numbers look like? And so what these numbers show here is the spend that the city has actually had over the last 5 years with our SWAM and non-SWAM businesses. So as you can see, there's been a lot of progression over the 5 years. We did have COVID in there, so we have a little bit of a dip. But what this actually shows, and what I like to have individuals focus on, is the dollars that you're actually spending with the small business community, because of course dollars help you grow, not percentages. This is representative of prime contractors only, and so we know that there's a bigger spend because there are subcontracting dollars out there, but without that tracking, we'll never know what those dollars are. And so this is our current fiscal year spend. As you can see, 27% of the city's spend went to SWAM businesses, SWAM certified businesses, which equates to $54 million. And 73% of that went to our non-SWAMs. It is important to also notate that in that non-SWAM category, we know that there are SWAM firms within that number. It is actually a personal choice, of course, whether a business goes through the certification process. But being in the industry for so long, several of us could say we know that there are a lot of businesses that would actually qualify for SWAM, and they just don't take that step to do that. They find the state process tedious, they find it very intrusive, of the information that they have to provide, so they would rather not provide that information to the state. You'll see a recommendation coming in a moment, but I think it's very coming from the outside, coming in. I think these are some very impressive dollar amounts that have been spent with our SWAM certified firms. $44.4 million to our small business community, $5.5 to our women-owned, and $4.1 in our minority certification category. So what are our next steps? We are looking to formalize our SWAM program activities through written policies and procedures. Consider some changes to our procurement process within the small purchase threshold to enhance some of the SWAM participation in city contracts, evaluate feasibility of establishing aspirational goals for our prime contractors and their utilization of certified SWAM vendors, looking at, is it feasible to do a disparity study, enhance our training, being a little more targeted on the industries that we want to see grow. We want to see some growth in those numbers in the various categories such as construction and our professional services and goods and services. So we want to target a little more in those categories to ensure that those opportunities are readily known. Continue to develop our SWAM subcontractor participation reporting and tracking. At this time, the way that is established is when a prime contractor actually submits for payment, they must also submit whether or not they utilized a SWAM firm, or who were their subcontractors during that time period before we actually submit payment to them. Evaluate the feasibility of our own certification process, once again going back to the complications that some of the small businesses find with going through the state certification process. And then implementing an annual review to measure performance in areas for improvement. We recognize and know that there are lots of other things that we can be doing, but for the most part, what is typically proposed through a disparity study process, we do have in place all of those things that I previously spoke about in what the SWAM Business Services Program is currently. So with that, I am at the end of my presentation, and I will ask if there are any questions.
I'll let the vice go first because I know you're the one that brought this to council's attention.
Yeah, I guess first, thank you so much for the presentation, both you and Susan, for sure. Timeline, I'm seeing working on a written policy procedures, next step for us. Do we have a timeline on when that we should expect that? Excuse me. And is that something that council has to vote on? Trying to get a better understanding of that.
For our implementation process, it really is looking at, well, one, we have to assure that we are aligned. A lot of the work that we do is based on code. There's some new codes that are coming down from the General Assembly, so making sure that we are in compliance with those new regulations. Our hope is to have some of this in place for fiscal year '24, but we would need to actually have that discussion with the city attorney's office and making sure that we're in compliance.
Okay, and then I'm glad you just mentioned that. The second piece, as we currently stand, whether it's federal, states, are we in compliance with whatever the requirements are?
Well, given the absence, I know that there's been some things. For all points and purposes, we are in compliance with where we need to be now. When you don't have a singular focus, this is new. I mean, it's 15 months in, reviewing and making sure that we've touched everything that we needed to touch. That was part of this 15 months, was exploring where are we, where do we need to be, and where do we want to go. So I've spent a lot of time doing that research and understanding how the city actually wanted this to work. So there's still a lot of planning that needs to take place.
Okay.
We're catching up, but I think we're still tracking pretty well.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, thanks for that presentation. As we compare ourselves to other localities in the area, where do we fall at percentage-wise? I think it's all 27% of our participation was Hawaiian businesses. How do we compare it to Hampton, Norfolk, Virginia Beach?
And I'll add, can we go back to that slide, ma'am? And I would add a second part of that question is, not only where do we rank out in like the 27%, but when you look at the differences between minority, women, and small, like what does that cut, per year, per different category?
And so, thank you for that question. We can get you that breakdown information. I won't say that I remember it off the top of my head, and I don't want to misquote the data. I would say we're trending well. The one thing about the region, there are only 3 localities that actually have a identified program. Norfolk, Virginia Beach, 4. Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, and Hampton. The 4 disparity studies are different. They're not all measuring the same categories, so it's not apples to apples. There are, of course, the 2 main categories, minority and women, that are being tracked by all 4 of the localities, but there are some differences in how the data is collected. So, with that said, we're trending well. We do recognize that we have some room for improvement in those categories. They're not as high as we would like them to be, but we're tracking well. I will say, based off of one of our neighboring communities, we're doing extremely well with our data, which was very exciting for me because that meant the foundation was there, and so it's just improving on the foundation. The one thing to also recognize with the data each year, those percentages, is it truly is based off of the projects that are done because they change every year. We're not doing the same projects. Like we're getting ready to have the Secret project. That's a large project. That's not an annual project. There's going to be different parts of that will get completed as we go along. You'll see a high dollar value, and then that dollar value is going to come down. We've got the Early Childhood Center, where that's some of this data that's here today. That's part of that work. We won't see that next year. So the data's always going to fluctuate. And that's why I say it's very important to focus on the dollars and not so much as your percentage, because we don't control who actually submits a bid to a solicitation. I'll give you a prime example. I've had the opportunity over the last 10 months to actually do solicitations with the focus on those that we know there are SWAM vendors that can actually, and more specifically, women and minorities that can actually bid on those solicitations. They don't respond. We do all we can. We exceed the number that the code actually says. We're only required let me back up and say, for most of the work that is done by a locality, it is under $100,000. And more specifically for small businesses, it's $50,000 or less. So that's where the big bang of your buck is coming from, is through those solicitations. And so when we solicit those out, the code says that we have to notify 4 women or minority-owned firms for that work. Lots of times we exceed that because you're choosing from a large list of businesses. Who are those 4? Who are those magical 4 that you're sending that solicitation to? So we will exceed that number to make sure that we actually can get it out to the best of our ability to as many as possible to respond to that solicitation. The one thing that I train on is, even if you're not going to respond to that bid, say no bid, so that we know that you want to continue to receive work. You just aren't ready or able to do the work today. So all in all, you're going to see a fluctuation no matter what, because it's based on what is the work that's being solicited for at the time. Is that a
Yes, thank you.
complete response for
That,
it?
that was good. I appreciate
Okay.
that.
All right.
But I do think, I do know, I think what has helped us with you being here, from the times I participated in some of your events. I think why the numbers are so low, the paperwork, most things with government, the paperwork is difficult and it's cumbersome for a lot of people. So I think with you having the workshops and allowing people to attend the ones when other guests come in, I think that will continue to help us because it'll help people understand the process to even get to the SWAM certification, which is a big barrier for so many people.
Absolutely. It's an education piece because there has to be an understanding
Right.
of what solicitations are you able to actually respond to. Once again, going back to the fact that the vast majority of our solicitations are small purchases. And so understanding you're not having to put proposals together to actually respond to a solicitation with the city. We're actually opening up the door and offering you the opportunity to win that particular contract with the city without having to put together a proposal. You're submitting a quote. And so you're just quoting out how much it would cost the city for you to actually have that contract. So once the small business community understand, I'm not having to put together a proposal, I'm not having to explain. We're not asking you to do that right now. The state has changed that threshold to $200,000, which now, if I don't have to put out a solicitation until it's $200,000, I've missed a whole lot of opportunity. We've missed a lot of opportunity for participation from our small business community, right? So our purchasing agent, Gary Seitler, by the way, sitting behind you, has kept our threshold at $100,000 so that we can continue to work and incorporate our small businesses into our process. So you're submitting a quote for services. So that burden is not on you to have to come up with a proposal of how you're going to do this work. The one thing that a lot of our small businesses do not understand how to put together. We do offer that. That's in conjunction with development at 25 and J with Shay Ponquinette. She runs that workshop on how to actually respond to a bid. So those are going to be bids with the City of Newport News over $100,000, where you actually have to read through a proposal and actually respond to that proposal. You have a larger threshold. Now we're talking about bonding. We're talking larger insurance, where that's where a lot of our small businesses are unable to compete because they are not able to get bonding in order to do that work. So I will say Newport News has done a great job of making sure of leveling the playing field so that our small businesses can participate in those solicitation opportunities.
Do we have any further questions?
I just have a quick comment. I just want to say thank you. I reached out to a gentleman reached out to me and said he was having issues with doing his SWAM certification. He called their office, said he's now SWAM certified, and he's able to get now government contracts. So I didn't know if certain contracts you have to be SWAM certified. And he said you helped him right through it, and he's been telling everybody about the services that Newport News have. So thank you so much for helping the young man, because he was very excited.
Thank you very much for that good news. And just because Mr. Ely said that, or Councilman Ely said the fact of having to have SWAM, and it is becoming very important because with the state, it's an automatic. They have to go with the SWAM certified business first. So it becomes important that no matter whether we're a locality or not, that we are actually working with our small business community to make sure they're SWAM certified, so those contract opportunities are available to them and they can continue to grow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think next up we have the fiscal year 2025-2029 City Manager recommended CIP.
And at this time, I'm pleased to call upon Lisa Cipriano, who will introduce the CIP plan presentation and the speaker this afternoon.
So not me. Good afternoon. One of the three major responsibilities of the Budget Department is to create and execute the annual CIP. We started the process for 25 in the summer of 2023. It was presented according to the city code by November 1st to City Council due to the fact that we had recently adopted the 24 CIP and to get some more information on some of our larger project bids, we delayed the process to bring you a renewed and refreshed 25 CIP. And I'd like to introduce Corey Cloud, the Assistant Director in all things capital responsible in the Budget Department, to give you the CIP presentation today.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I appreciate that greeting. Thank you. So I'm going to just jump right into the overview. So just to give tonight's presentation is a high-level overview of the recommended plan. So just the overview of what is the CIP, the impact that it has financially on the city, and then go into a little bit of the projects that's included in the recommended plan. So with that, I'm going to jump right into, of course, the city CIP is a multi-year plan that establishes a schedule for our most important capital projects and equipment replacements. The plan is based on our strategic priorities. So when we're looking at projects that's included in the recommended plan, we're looking at how does it impact people, places, and government. So we're looking at how does these projects connect people with welcoming neighborhoods, how are we addressing public safety and well-being, and are we doing good quality, sustainable projects throughout the city in terms of our environmental responsibility. So some of the uses of CIP funds are property acquisition, planning and design that comes with construction and major renovation projects, replacement of our vehicles as well as our equipment. And it is funded through a couple of different funding sources. One being through the issuance of debt. As you recall, in the beginning of the fiscal year, we did close on the issuance of bonds in preparation for capital project expenditures throughout the year. So we did that in July of 2023. And in the CIP, we lay out the schedule for debt financing of various projects. Cash capital, which is a direct contribution from our operating budget, as well as grant funding that we receive through state and federal agencies. We also receive and partner with public and private companies in terms of developer contributions in certain projects in the CIP. So just jumping into an overview of what that plan looks like and financially what is the plan commitment in terms of the CIP. This slide is conducive of all funding sources that we just went over in the previous slide. And the totality for the recommended 2025 plan is about $1 billion, or $75 million less than what was approved in 2024. It's comprised of about 130 projects, which 111 projects are stemming from just moving those forward from last year's approved plan or the currently approved plan. So there wasn't a lot of flexibility considering our capacity to add new projects, but the main focus is to continue to focus on transformational projects that we already have built into our CIP plan. So we've been trying to lead into these CIP plans with that particular focus of just moving projects forward that we've identified as long priorities for the city. So just a couple of slides just to focus on just the general fund component that projects that directly impact the general fund. So the two funding sources that I talked about so far, being debt, is paid through the general fund in the form of general debt service payments, annual debt service payments each year, as well as our cash capital component, which is cash directly budgeted for in the operating fund. So you'll see in the orange, our recommended plan currently has $589 worth of bond-funded or cash capital projects. And in terms of our commitment to the city and financing the plan, when we look at the financial ratios and debt management policies, we have 5 policies that we look at in terms of developing the CIP. One of them is not as crucial to the impact of the financial capacity, which is the first one, which is our unassigned fund balance at 14.9% at the end of fiscal year 2023. The other ratios is directly related to the CIP in terms of capacity and commitment. So when we look at our debt burden ratio, we're well below that ratio. And then you'll see that we're financing our projects way above the 20%. And we're below our debt service obligation as compared to the revenue that we generate. And we're well ahead of our payout schedule. So when we look at the 2025 CIP, and some of this information is probably familiar to you because Kevin Rowdy from PFM has delivered a couple of presentations on our debt portfolio. But when we look at the impact from 2025's recommended plan, as we go through and project out very conservatively, I would say, because our projections are looking at us issuing debt every year. And we typically issue debt 18 to 24 months. So the bond issue that we recently did in July 2023, we're probably anticipating going out to sell bonds late in fiscal year 2025's summer or early fiscal year 2026. But with the current plan, we do push up against our financial policies with 2.9% and 2031 against our debt burden ratio. We still funding the plan each year at 20% cash capital. And one thing I say about that commitment is when we start getting into these large redevelopment projects or these new construction projects, that is directly impacting our contribution of cash capital. So when you think about doing a $50 million building, you're talking about 20% of that at least being included, and it all adds up when you look at the overall plan. So those different components can add stress just to meet our ratios, can add stress to the operating budget to contribute to the plan. When we look at our debt service obligation and where we would go with our annual debt service payments compared to revenue, we're pushing up against a 9.5% at 8.7%. Well, we stay well ahead of our payout ratios of 36% compared to 30 over 5 years and 60%. We'll still be at 67% in 10 years in terms of the outstanding debt that will be remaining to pay off. So when we look at the impact in the general fund debt service payments, it does show that at our highest point, we would be expected to pay $76 million in annual debt service payments in 2032. Now, again, this assumes that we're borrowing every year. What you'll see up at the top, fiscal year 23 and 24, is still included in this projection of our debt service payments for the future. And being that we're in 24 right now, we still haven't borrowed for what we can for 23's bond authorization. And we don't expect to draw against that authorization until 2026. So you can see that historically we haven't borrowed every year, but in order to remain conservative in how we look and review our financial capacity, we assume that we will borrow every year to fulfill these plans. Yes, sir.
With the recommended numbers that you showed here, how would that impact the ratings with our own policy?
That is a good question. There's a lot that goes into determining what impacts our rates. Of course, having elevated debt, outstanding debt, will go into factoring that equation. And in our past bond sales, it has been recognized that we have elevated but manageable debt as compared to other localities of similar size. But that hasn't been a factoring component in impacting our rate in the past, and we don't foresee that going forward in the future. Some of the key elements that impact our ratio going forward is the income levels within the city of Newport News is one of the driving factors that impacts our ratios. Our credit rating, I should say. And when we look at that, a lot of what we're doing in the CIP is trying to address that particular issue in terms of raising income levels by doing these transformational redevelopment projects. So it's a lot of give and take when you talk about what it will take for us to increase to AAA bond rating. And one of the things that we look at every year is where do we stand on being able to obtain that. The other slide also mentioned our unassigned fund balance at 14.9%. That's another element that they look at in terms of how much money do we keep in our unassigned fund balance, meaning that's money that we have to save and put away and not look forward to using to contribute to that increase in bond rating. And that can be a significant lift from where we at today if we're trying to get to 20%. So it's a lot of factors, and it'll be some tough decisions in order to get to that AAA. But we also have to think about what's the trade-off. In the past years, when we looked at the bonds and selling bonds, our interest rates was less than 1%, less than 0.5% difference between where we stand now to borrow the money versus where we would be if we borrowed and had the AAA rating. So the commitment to get there versus what the payoff would be in debt service has not been a big margin for in terms of how much we go to borrow and the interest rates that we get. But that's something that we continue to look at.
Nice.
Yeah, so the other slide that you showed us, the projected ratio extremes, the other slide factors that in, correct? So even if we were to do, were you seeing, what was it, FY 32, like 76 million that we were paying?
Yep.
We still, if say, and this was conservative again, but if we do nothing and that plays out, we are still within these projected ratio extremes,
Yes.
factoring that in, correct?
Yes. So we will be. If we were to follow the recommended plan as it's laid out to a T and borrowed every year, that 76 million is what's translated here as well with our financial ratios. And again, and the other part is, a part of your adopted operating budget, I believe it was in 23, it may have been this year, but debt service reserve, that was something that we've had the foresight to see, like, hey, we got a lot of redevelopment projects, we got school projects, we got projects that's going to cost have a significant investment in the city, and so we've been using debt service reserve anytime that we could to contribute to that, so that when we deal with the future issuances, we can try to smooth out the spikes or the increases that will burden the general fund in the future. So we do have debt service reserve that we've been building in anticipation for some of these larger investments that we have to make in the CIP.
That's good.
So one thing to remember with the CIP is that even though it's a 5-year plan and it's brought forward for City Council to adopt a 5-year plan, only the first year of the CIP is actually adopted and moved forward for project appropriation. This slide shows the year one comparison to what we now have adopted in 2024 compared to what's recommended in 2025. For the most part, it's not an apples to apples look because you have projects that will fall off and not be funded for a full 5 years, such as our CNI project. In 24, we had 3 years of funding. In 25, we only have 2 years of funding for the remaining completion of the CNI area. But when you look at something like public buildings, where we have a $47 million increase, that right there is related to the community facility component for SECRA. Last year, we didn't have anything in terms of construction costs for SECRA, but partly because in fiscal year 2023, we programmed $50 million for Huntington Middle, and then we also had the $21 million in grants. So for last year's CIP, or this current 24 CIP, we didn't have a huge infrastructure cost related to that project. But in fiscal year 2025, as things are expected to get underway, we did put in $50 million for the community center component of SECRA. So stuff like that you'll see inside of the plan, where 1 year it looks like this, and then the next year it may be higher or lower depending on the movement of the projects. And this is all related to just cash capital and GOB related to the general fund projects. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to get into the categories and the projects that's included in the categories and just give a brief overview. the projects that's included is not all of the projects that's included in the recommended plan. You'll be able to see that in the summary sheets that you have. And we also will have the book posted online to review all of the projects with the complete project descriptions. So for community development, for the 5-year plan, we got approximately $60 million programmed throughout. And in fiscal year 25, we have $19.3 million. Throughout the presentation, we'll highlight what projects are included in the first year by identifying it with fiscal year 25. So Choice Neighborhood Initiative, as I mentioned, have 2 years of funding with $6.4 million in 25, and that's for the completion of the community elements of the plan. Also have, not listed here, like the seafood market and other public utility infrastructure improvements that's related to the CNI. We also have master plans. Most of the things that we find in the community development area has a master plan that was adopted by City Council, and we provide funding for the Denby Warwick area master plan as well as the Lee Hall master plan, and funding throughout the 5 years also includes support for Kmart site development. When we talk about City Center at Oyster Point, we want to continue to invest in the existing infrastructure, but we also know that we have opportunity for expansion in City Center, and part of the funding that's included in year one will go towards a study to look at how we can incorporate expanding City Center to include additional entertainment space and public space for recreation for our citizens. So you'll see some pictures, but those are just illustrated. It does not indicate exactly what will be going on, but just
I was
some.
getting excited, man. I saw the basketball court. What is that?
Some planning and design.
There you go. It's right there.
So we look forward to, trying to increase some more outdoor dining opportunities and just some outside entertainment venue space. Some of the funding also includes infrastructure improvement for the stormwater infrastructure that would be necessary to expand City Center. You guys, well, I'm not going to say you guys.
I'm sorry, real quick. Just out of curiosity, I imagine in doing or in trying to bring this to fruition, it's in collaboration with the ownership of City Center, or no?
Well, Florence is here, so she can.
I mean, we can
all,
punt that question.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is all city invested dollars. That's being displayed here. No developer contributions being involved in this particular recommended plan. But of course, we seek any and every opportunity to have that collaborative effort with developers to be engaged with these type of public infrastructure investments. So we'll look forward to that opportunity. The downtown initiatives, we've been making good strides with development along 23rd Street. We are finishing up the James River Strand, and we want to continue to capitalize on the Downtown Reimagined Master Plan. And with doing that, City Council saw a presentation on all the investment that we're doing down here in downtown, as well as with the Greek Church and the possibility of reusing the Greek Church as a part of that redevelopment factor. So plant funding is in the plan, is there for $3.7 million in 25, and part of that is to go towards the Greek Church renovation as well as the train station restaurant. Then when we look at other waterfront assets, maritime economic development projects, we got $10.6 million across the 5 years to go towards improvements at Seafood Industrial Park, 23rd Street Pier, as well as Mitchville Marina. That's currently getting to be underway. The Southeast community, we continue to invest about $2.5 million a year for redevelopment and strategic acquisition and rehab of various properties. Tech Center Master Plan, we continue to have funding to support that master plan and bring forward different infrastructure and implementation to complete that. And then as we move along to streets and bridges, how are we connecting the communities that we serve and creating good, healthy pathways and road conditions for our citizens? So You've seen the presentation on the bicycle master plan. Funding is included to support that at $9.3 million with $250,000 for transportation studies and preliminary design. And we are still seeking grant funding to support this plan. As it's presented in the recommended CIP, it's 100% city funded at this time. But we think with the initial investment that we can increase our chances of getting grant money to support the project. Birthplace of America's Trail is approximately $20.2 million, and we do anticipate about $5 million currently in grant funding to support segments of construction for those trails. I'm not going to go through all of the projects that's listed here for streets and bridges, but there's significant investment for improvement of our streets. The first going from Jefferson Avenue all the way down to Walnut Avenue in the southeast community for 16th Street Complete Streets. And Complete Streets projects are very robust. It's not just creating smooth drive lanes. It's anything from park benches to the landscaping along and sidewalk improvements and things of that nature that go with complete street projects. We continue to invest $500,000 a year into the upgrade and replacement of street lighting to LED lighting throughout the city. And we have $9 million right now for downtown pedestrian improvements. This is new sidewalks, new signaling, crosswalks, ADA compliant ramps throughout all of downtown and various locations of downtown to improve pedestrian access and mobility.
I got a question about the LED street lighting.
Yep.
When we're replacing the LED, are we just doing the fixture, or is the entire structure of the pole as well? I mean, so it could be a continuity across the city of, you know, light poles.
I'm gonna have Craig answer that question.
I didn't totally hear the question.
So when we're doing the LED light program, are we changing just the fixture or the entire assembly, the pole as well?
Typically, it'll just be the fixture itself. Typically, we're replacing in kind. It could be a Cobra, it could be a Colonial type, but usually in various areas within the city, they change somewhat. So whatever it is in that area, we're gonna keep it that. Cobra is probably the least expensive that we have. But the thing that we have now, remember, the Dominion, we had the program for Dominion, all that's done. So what we have right now is our own city-owned lights that we're doing right now for the LED stuff.
The reason I asked that question, I have had that comment come up about when you go across the city, you don't have the same look across the city when you're looking at the light fixtures. I mean, there are places where you have certain style in one area of town that looks more beautiful, and the other section of town that doesn't look like we have a continuity of a city across Jefferson Ward Boulevard. So this is something just heard from people about how do we make the city look the same across the board, not just only a certain section.
That is true. I mean, based on different developments and how things progressed over the years, different light fixtures were put in across the city, and we don't have anything in place right now for a plan to make everything consistent. Because it would be difficult to go into some of the neighborhoods, some of the developments to go, hey, we're going to change all your lights out to whatever it ends up being. So right now it's just a mixture of a variety of different lights. I'd say probably the majority of the lights, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'd have to check, but it might be Cobra, and they're Dominion owned, but that might be the majority of lights that we have throughout the city.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Let's push through in that.
All right, I got you.
8 minutes that we have.
You got 8 minutes?
Thank you.
I can get there. All right, so I just wanted to highlight one last thing here is that almost 52% of the total funding that's in streets and bridges is coming from some type of state or federal grant support as well. So I think that's a huge effort and testament to our engineering department for always looking for ways to make sure that we grabbing every opportunity to get state funding for these projects. So when we move on to schools, we recognize that Warwick High School was one of the main and highest priorities for the schools division. In this plan, we are moving the construction, we moved the project up 1 year in this plan. In fiscal year 24, design didn't come in until fiscal year 26. In this recommended plan, we're going to provide funding for design in 2025 and we also right-size the construction costs based on current estimates that was provided from school. So instead of $50 million in construction, we have $64 million for construction and renovation for Warwick High. In the last year of the plan, we also have design money for starting Denby High School renovation as well. So in each year of the plan, we maintain $10 million regardless of any major improvement or addition that we do in the schools. We're just going to continue to support renovations for the division at $10 million each year and provide the $2 million each year for school bus replacements. When we look at public buildings, this is where we have most of our larger redevelopment projects, one being Secret, which I already touched on. We also right-size Grissom Library construction for current estimates. It's currently estimated to be approximately $39 million for site improvement and construction of the library. $5.8 million closes the gap for what we already have identified from prior year funding. One of the new additions to the CIP is Fire Station number 9, replacement Fire Station number 9. It was built in 1958, and this has been identified as one of the fire stations that serves the largest population in the city of Newport News and is in need of updating to meet current standards. Sherwood is a project that I'm pretty sure that we've discussed multiple times in this room or elsewhere. So funding continues to be in place for that with $3 million in year one to go towards design efforts for the site. Major renovations and repairs is kind of self-explanatory. We maintain almost 265 buildings, city-owned. So this includes our community centers, city hall, and things of that nature, and we're providing $6.5 million over the 5 years, each year over the 5 years to address those needs. The court building is something that we had in the approved 24, where we provided $1 million to start master planning. In this plan, we have 2 years that goes towards design and probably construction, but we know that that's going to be a heavy lift. All funding that's scheduled for court building is not comprised in that $18.5 million, unfortunately.
What's the delta for the court building?
Right now, we kind of don't have that firm number. After they get done with pretty much master planning and seeing what is needed in the new court facility, we'll be able to have that number. I think early estimates were maybe $100 million or in excess of $100 million. So,
thank you.
Yep. And then we have Parks and Recreation. We got $34 million programmed throughout. One of the main projects that we've been continuously doing is updating athletic field lighting, and we maintain approximately $300,000 a year to go towards those efforts. Riverview Farm Park, we continue to maintain money in there once master planning or just the initial discussions are had to start thinking about what we want to do there. So that's strictly a placeholder for eventual development of the old City Farm property. And we continue to invest in our existing facilities and park structures at $6.1 million. Equipment needs, this is just basic annual recurring funding for replacement of fire trucks and public safety equipment like radios and mobile tablets. And also our information technology investment fund where we buy new computers and software. So when we talk about environmental sustainability, our other funds, our public utility funds, which is stormwater drainage, sewer rehabilitation and waterworks, that's what we're doing heavy, intensified infrastructure improvement projects to our delivery systems for our customers. It's strictly supported by the revenue that's generated from citizen and customer fees. The one thing I do want to highlight, waterworks, almost $240 million. One of the projects includes responding to new EPA regulations. I was practicing how to say that word but I'm just going to stick to PFAS, and that's it. But there's regulations now that will change the PFAS levels in the drinking water, but that will require new treatment facilities to be built. And this $44 million from talking with Jan, who's the director from Waterworks, this is kind of on the low end of what he may expect. Depending on that final rule, it may be much more to be able to address removing those PFAS elements from the drinking water. So next steps, I would say, number one, the recommended book in its entirety will be posted online this evening for the public to view. We're also going to have printed books being delivered to City Council at least by the next work session. And then we anticipate bringing the CIP for consideration to be adopted at least by April 23rd, but we definitely want to give you guys an opportunity to review and ask any questions or provide any input to the recommended plan. We also have an interactive map of sorts in which you can view the CIP, and it's not up here.
Where you can check the progress and all that. I saw it. That
Okay.
was awesome.
But it's going to be available on the website as well for you to go ahead and click, and it'll pop up and show you exactly where the projects are located, as well as give you the project description for the project. So with that, I'll take any questions if there is any.
I got a question. This is really pertaining to the bill that's for the 1% sales tax. This is going to come down to the voters if we have a referendum, they vote on it. What does that translate, that 1% sales tax, what would that actually translate into actual capital dollars for school construction? Has that been even thought about or entertained in the office?
So right now, we have estimated $32 million, and that's based on our 1 cent.
Okay.
So, and of course, it's economy driven, so another 1 cent, assuming the same amount of sales, that there wouldn't be any reduction and inflation reduction, 30 million.
Okay.
But when we look at that, we have to remember that there indicates it's a short-term window. It's not a lifelong 1%. So 1 cent, 1%.
Right,
So
1%.
it's a short window, but you can get debt service for $30 million. You could do a mixture of some projects and debt for that $30 million.
Okay. All right, thanks.
I think we're good. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, great job.
Next up, we have comments, ideas, suggestions. City Manager.
None for me.
I just want to remind everybody that in your packet, probably downstairs, it's from Parks and Rec for Easter spring. Just don't throw it away. Where did you say from? Here, downstairs. Yeah.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Councilman Long's question. We had a council retreat last year on the CIP. So ideally, if it's possible, I think 2 retreats. We can talk about it later, but I really think it is important that we meet again and talk about the CIP so we can get in alignment. But at least those 2, I think, would do us very good justice by having a regular retreat for council, kind of set the tone for the year, and then, of course, a specific CIP retreat, and that's all I got.
No comment.
I don't have anything.
Just a reminder to City Council, so everyone can sign the acknowledgement form. We need that back so we can have that on file. They have it. Perfect. I'll save most of my comments for tonight. I know we have a lot of comments. Take us in closed session.
All right. I move that pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, subsection 1, 5, and 39, that the council hold a closed meeting for the purpose of 1, a discussion, consideration, or interview of prospective candidates for employment assignments, employment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, subject of which is discussion or consideration of prospective candidates for appointments to boards and commissions and members thereof. 5, a discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, the subject of which is a potential expansion of existing business in the south section of the city. 39, discussion or consideration of proprietary information voluntarily provided by a private business pursuant to a promise of confidentiality from a public body used by the public body for business, trade, and tourism development or retention, the subject of which is discussion of a report provided by entity to assist the city in analyze its regional asset inventory.
It's a mouthful. Moved
It
and
is.
seconded.
Councilwoman Vick,
4.
Councilwoman Woodbury, Vice Mayor Bethany,
4.
Councilman Ely,
4.
Councilman Harris,
4.
Mayor Jones,
4.
Councilman Long.
4.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Really? He said.
This is our first meeting since One City Marathon, or am I making that up?
Yeah, it's the first meeting.
Okay, good. All right. I'm just not. So you should go with me.
I think I'm last, so that's good. What everyone said.
Okay, we're good.
All right. I move that members of the council certify that, to the best of each member's knowledge, one only, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which a closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting by the council.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Vick. 4. Councilwoman Woodbury. 4. Vice Mayor Bethany.
4.
Councilman Ely.
4.
Councilman Harris.
4.
Mayor Jones.
4.
Councilman Long.
You can report or you can abstain, that's up to you.
And let me just abstain then.
Okay. Motion carried 6-0, 1 abstention.
I think we have to make a motion to approve, we have to make a motion to ratify the appointments.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Vick.
4.
Councilwoman Woodbury. 4. Vice Mayor Bethany.
4.
Councilman Ely.
4.
Councilman Harris. 4. Mayor Jones.
4.
Councilman Long.
4.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you all, we stand adjourned.
Question about spending.